get live streamed up on, for the people who want to watch, up on Facebook. Yeah, so we're going to talk about this. I guarantee you there's people who've taught, well, I know that they have. They've taught entire classes, a whole course on this psalm. Yeah, books, single books that are just on this psalm. Harold Kushner, who wrote When Bad Things Happen to Good People, wrote a Psalm 23 book. It's a great book, but it's a great book because he writes great books, and it's uses that as a launching point for his approach to theology. But it is not probably, as we'll discuss, it's a little ridiculous because Psalm 23, and you've already read 20 Psalms. Let me just make sure we're up. We're up. Is not unique, really, in a lot of ways. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to read it first. We're going to listen to some versions of it, and then we're going to, obviously discuss it, and maybe not necessarily in that order. But it's difficult to read a psalm, or any part of the Bible for that matter, that is so well known, that has so many layers of preconceived notions on it, that this really stands out as a part of the Bible that we all bring our own stuff to because we've all heard it. Virtually every funeral you've heard it at. I don't say it at every funeral. I don't. I just did a funeral yesterday. I did not do it. I'll tell you one of the reasons I don't do it. Well, maybe I'll tell you when we discuss it, but I don't do it every time. I will do, and honestly, I will do this at every funeral unless it's a very tragic young person dying. I do Kohelet. I do Ecclesiastes chapter 3. A time for everything under heaven, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born, a time to do that. Psalm 121, Esai and I, is definitely used at a lot of funerals, especially Jewish funerals, is considered definitely one of the top ones. The reason why I like Kohelet, why I like Ecclesiastes, is because I open with it. I never close with it, but I open with it because I want to establish the fact that there's a time to laugh, there's a time to cry, and maybe that'll happen. I don't say this, but maybe there'll be a time to do that just in this one sitting, which I think is pretty amazing. No, I don't sing Psalm. No, to everything, turn. I don't do that, but I will tell you that I think it really does speak to that. And during COVID, when I got to the line of, and there's a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, that line took on new power for me. And it became now a psalm that for me was a perfect explanation of, oh, well, you can't embrace. Even if you wanted to, you can't. Parts of the Bible? Yeah. When we look at Ecclesiastes, which we'll do very soon, you'll see the context to some extent of that, that's one of the cheerier parts of the book of Ecclesiastes. A lot of Ecclesiastes is a major downer. That's the happy part of it. And again, right now, when I'm saying, there's a time of war and a time of peace, that also now has, and by the way, I'm going to tell you something, quite frankly. I don't know. I didn't always use that line. There's a time of war and a time of peace. I didn't really say that line because I don't really think there's a time of war. I don't think, I get the point, and I don't know if it excuses war or if it makes a statement, but I don't like that line. I didn't use it. I'm using it now. And the reason I'm using it now to some extent is I feel that it's just, that's what's happening now. And to ignore that is ridiculous because there is a war going on right now. And so you have to acknowledge it. But at some point, as I was saying it, I was like, am I giving sanction to this? Am I saying it's good to have war? The other thing is that because thankfully for most of the last 50 years, we haven't been in world wars. We haven't been in a war that everyone's been involved with. I almost feel like, I know there's always wars going on, but I also, in the context of that funeral, that space, are we really talking about war all the time? And so I just didn't do it. I didn't do it. Yeah.
especially after October 7th, is when someone is attacking you, there's a time.
I get it. Regardless of, but my point is that regardless of whether I sanction it, whether I endorse it, whether I whatever, it's here. And so acknowledging it as part of the psalm. So to some extent, I am saying that oftentimes when I say that's part of Ecclesiastes, I don't want to acknowledge it. I don't want to think about war. And it really is happening. I mean, it's everywhere, every moment of every day of my life, there's been a war going on in some part of the world, whether I choose to think about it or whether I've blocked it out or whether it's just not my people, it's not my country, it's not people that I know. And so I don't think about it. But I mean, there's been a war in Sudan for most of the last 20 years, 25 years. I don't wake up every day and think about it. I don't put on a sticker for Darfur every day. There are people who do, but I don't. So yes, Psalm 27 is a great psalm, and we actually use it during the high holidays. And we have a beautiful version of that. I don't think we're going to get to it today, but let's get back to the Psalms. Let's get back to Psalm 23. So let's read it through in its entirety, and let's get into that issue of why we read this at funerals. So Rosemary, take it away. Mizmor LaDavid is the beginning, but it's actually 2 words, which is a Psalm of David. And then it gets immediately into Adonai Roi Lo Achsar, which is the Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing, or I shall not want. Or it's hard to read this without thinking of the King James, by the way, too. That's the other thing. When I read other translations, how do you not think of, should I say my cup runneth over here? It's hard. Yes, we know it by heart. So we knew it as Adonai Roi, the Lord is my shepherd. That's what Jews knew it as. Now we know it as Psalm 23, but for years, like we said last week, like we knew Adonai, Lama Sabachthani, or Eloi, Eloi, Lama Sabachthani, or Azav Tani. That's how we knew Psalm 22. So here we go. Adonai Roi Lo Achsar.
The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me to water in places of repose. He renews my life. He guides me in right paths, as befits his name. Though I walk through a valley of deepest darkness, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread a table for me in full view of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My drink is abundant. Only goodness and steadfast love shall pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for many long years.
Yeah. So this is a literal translation of this psalm. It's almost overly literal, obviously.
So you're saying it's a good translation?
It's good in parts, and it's also takes some liberties. So for example, here, where it says a valley of deep darkness, the valley of the shadow of death is a better translation of the literal meaning for it. The translator took deepest darkness as a way of translating Salmavet, which literally means the image of death, or as we say, shadow of death. A Sal is an image or a shadow, but it's not death, right? It's the image of death, or it's the appearance of death. In Hebrew, a tselem, and we know the word, B'Tselem Adonai, in the image of God, doesn't mean it's God. It means it's a likeness of, it's a reproduction. In modern Hebrew, tselem is the root for photography. Yeah. It's a holograph. It's a reproduction of it, but it's not the real thing. We don't say we're God. We say we're in the image of God. So Salmavet is in the image or in the likeness and the appearance of death. That's for sure. Okay. That's okay. Gay means valley. Now, most of us would understand valley of the image of death or the shadow of death as a dark place. That's why they translate it as deepest darkness. I think it's they went a little too far.
A little euphemistic, not to mention death.
Yes. That's why we say it at a funeral. There's a couple reasons, right? That's one of them. I'm in the valley of the shadow of death. I'm around death. I'm in the valley of death. I'm in a cemetery. I'm in a death. Look, that's one of the reasons. The other reason, of course, is, right? But the last line is, I will dwell in the house of the Lord for many long years. La'orech yamim. Now, the King James decided to translate that forever. There's a word for forever. It's not that word. Leolam vaed means forever and ever, or, leolam means for eternity. It's not the word. Orech yamim is for many long years, for many days. Orech yamim means, we use the word in Hebrew all the time, to lengthen your days, to have many days. Orech means to lengthen or to extend, and yamim are days. And living in the house of the Lord, Beveit Adonai, we assume that means the temple. We've already seen the word Beveit Adonai used in the Psalms. It seems to be Jerusalem, or in the house of the Lord, literally being the temple. So this is somebody who gets to live. Look, if it's David, it's David gets to live in Jerusalem, right? So there is a lot to say that this is a Psalm of David, right? The fact that this guy talks about shepherd, being a shepherd, that there's enemies, and again, this is the other reason why we say it's for death, right? He makes me lie down in green pastures. By the way, when I never say that at a funeral? When someone's buried in a crypt. I'm not joking, which was yesterday. Yesterday, I did a crypt service at Hillside. To say someone's lying in green pastures, but clearly that's not what the context is anyways. The psalm is very much like the other psalms that we've seen, which is a shepherd taking care of his flock, of a sheep. We're the sheep, God is the flock, the Lord is my shepherd, it says right there. Now, Christians obviously love it because this idea of Jesus being the shepherd, this fits very well with that imagery that we're being taken care of. And that's interesting, right? Because is it Jesus, or is he the sheep, or is God, is God the Father taking care of him? Yeah, there's different ways that this could be looked at, but a lot of Christians, if you read a lot of the commentary, that Christians will say that this is Jesus as the shepherd, the good shepherd taking care of us. But yeah, I mean,
where do they get that from?
From the imagery and the other words in the Gospels that say that. But it's also based on the connection that Jesus has to King David and to Moses.
Also, Rabbi, in my notes, it says a widely used metaphor for kings in the ancient Near East, and also
as a shepherd, as a king.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a metaphor for kings. Yeah, and that also played into the image of Jesus as a shepherd. All those factors, but yeah.
How did the translation of the last sentence
get so weird?
Many days forever. Missed it.
No, we didn't. There's no. Because and he's right. We didn't say it. How do you get that? Now, there is a logic to it, and it's not a Christian thing. I just want to make that clear. The Jewish understanding of it allowed for that, even though the Hebrew doesn't really. Let me explain why. So it says, goodness and love will follow me, right? And that's the word, follow me. Yardefeni could also be translated as, pursue, which is the way they translate it here. We say follow me in the King James, right? The King James says, follow me. And that's the way a lot of us know it. But pursue me is actually the better translation. The word rodef in Hebrew is a pursuer. So it's going to chase after me. Yeah.
She has to repeat the question.
So John asked, how did we get from Orech Yamim, from many long years, which is the translation of the Hebrew, literal Hebrew, to forever? I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Long years is not forever, but I'm explaining. So here it is, right here. It's kol yemei chayei, right? Which is all the days all the days, the yamim chai, of my life. Now, that still seems to imply I'm alive, right? Not in the next world. But the rabbis begin, and for those who are there with us on Wednesday nights who are reading the Talmud, the rabbis will oftentimes take, especially in, biblical Hebrew, in the couplet, the doublet style, where they say something and they use the synonym for it again. So here, kol yemei chai is repeated by orech yamim. Okay, you got that, right? Now the rabbis start interpreting things like kol yemei chai would be all the days of my life in this world, and orech yamim are my days in the next world. So the rabbis begin that association because, number one, they believe in the afterlife strongly. It's a big part of their belief. And they will look for texts to hold that on. And one of the ways they do it, and you'll see it, we've seen it, we've already seen it in the Talmud, in Brachot, and you guys have seen this on Wednesdays. I'm saying, like, Mary, Mike, John, people who've been here have seen this, Jesse. They do it all the time. They'll say the first one applies to this world and the next one applies to the next world. They do it all the time. So that's how we get to that, because people start to, they believe in the next world and they start extending the repetitions of it to that. And so that's how you get it. You get it from the repetition of all the days of my life and orech yamim. So that's where it comes from. Again, it also comes from this weird repositioning. And I've read Christian scholars who said that this is not correct. This is not a psalm about someone dying. I've read a lot of Christian commentaries on this. The Christian commentators are now beginning to say this has nothing to do with the person who died. This is about the people who are left behind. This is for us who are grieving for someone. When we're in the darkest place of our mourning, for example, but doesn't just have to be mourning, we're not alone. That we are surrounded by God. And I almost always contextualize that. I don't say, hey, Psalm 23 that we're about to read, when I do it at a funeral, I don't say, hey, it's not for that person in the coffin. I never say that, though I usually do say it once. I don't usually say it in the chapel. I usually say it once we go up to the grass. And I normally do it also because, like, people expect it. And I've had people flat out say, you are going to do Psalm 23. So I almost always say that even in our darkest moments, we're never alone. In our grief, we're always surrounded and protected by love. Because that's what this is. When David or whoever is writing this or feeling this, the whole purpose of this is to let people know, and we've already seen it in the other Psalms we've gotten to at this point, and that's why I say, you've seen this. There are dark parts of the Psalm, which there are here, right? I'm in the valley of the shadow of death. There's a table before me in the presence of my enemies, right? That means there's enemies out there. That again, what does that mean? It means there's people who are trying to destroy me. There's people who are angry with me. I have enemies. The Psalm reminds us or tells us flat out, there are people out there that are going to try to hurt you. Well, but you're not alone. God's there protecting you and taking care of you even in that moment. So it's clearly a Psalm which, again, maybe not as much as some of the other Psalms, it does tell us there's bad stuff out there. The valley of the shadow of death, no matter what, however you're going to translate that, is not a good place to be. It's scary. And the Psalm doesn't just talk about cheery things. It does talk about the scary places and that God is with us even in those places. And I would, again, as you've seen, it's less of that than there are in other Psalms. I mean, the Psalm we just read, Psalm 22, they're breaking my bones. They're dividing up my clothes. I mean, that's really scary. Those are the enemies that are literally beating you up in the Psalm. This one, it's not as scary, but it's still scary. The valley of the shadow of death is not a good place. So it's in there. What's interesting also about this Psalm that some people have pointed out is also the structure, right? Initially, the psalmist is saying, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me, right? He renews my life. He guides me in straight paths, right? And right here in verse 4, it changes, right? It changes from the third person, he, God, he, and all of a sudden the psalmist is addressing God directly. I fear no harm, for you are with me. Now it's the second person. So a lot of people don't catch that. You don't have to be a grammar scholar to catch this. There's a shift in that in the beginning, the psalmist is talking about God as if God is not there. And now he or she is talking directly to God. This is all the stuff you've done, God, for me.
It's almost like missing something.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
So Mike says we're missing something. What do you think we're missing?
But I think there's more to this, and it was edited out.
Meaning something between the shift?
Yeah, between the shift.
Now,
I've always thought that.
so when you look at the point of this, this is also where the darkness starts,
Yeah.
but it ends with, you anoint my head with oil, my cup is abundant. Now look, when it says that God anoints my head with oil, I mean, there aren't a lot of us that get that treatment, right? That's the definition of the Messiah. Anointing a head with oil is what happens to the Messiah. It's what makes the Messiah. The word Messiah means the anointed one. And it was anointed with oil, putting oil on the person's head. So you don't get more messianic than that in the sense that that's what happens to the Messiah. Not that it's messianic, but in the terms of what literally a Messiah is, that's what it is. Someone who had oil placed on their head. And again, this phrase, my drink is abundant, my cup overflows, I have so much in my cup. This is an interesting image too, because this is God taking care of me by keeping me hydrated. Look at that, Mike. This guy, they're all walking around with water bottles.
Yeah.
They're all walking. No, seriously. All of a sudden, we all walk around with, we're always drinking. We always got water. I mean, hopefully that's water in there. I'm hoping that's water. John, is that water? So the point is you're walking around with a cup because we're told now we got to be hydrated. I mean, I don't know if they understood that better in the ancient world, but we're understanding it now. But this idea that this is a symbol of life, that this is a symbol of God taking care of me. What? Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Totally different than everybody else. And this is like, obviously my first time through this. I mean, I've read it before.
Yeah.
Obviously. And, in the military, they put a twist to it, bit of a crude twist, but they do. But now that I'm looking at it with everybody here, I don't look at this as a prayer for the heroes. I look at this as a prayer before battle. And, why would you spread a table for me in full view of my enemies, right? Why would you have that there? And then the first line, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing, right? And then you go down and the table in front of my enemies. In other words, God is with the people that are reading this.
That's really interesting.
Right? And now I'm ready to go, right? I have everything I need, and I'm not gonna lose this battle because I'm gonna be with you for many long years. So the fact that it was changed to forever, well, that's fine. But this actually, it's very interesting the way I read this. And you spread the table with the enemies, you anoint my head with oil. Okay, I understand what you're saying, the anointing. I get that. But if you're going to succeed, right, in battle, right, you're blessed, right? Let's go.
Yep. So John's comment here, in case you didn't hear it, is really a sense of
Fear no harm.
this is a more of preparing for battle.
Your rod and your staff are with me.
Well, I will tell you that one of the things that lends itself to that type of idea, and again, David was a soldier, right? He was a warrior. And so that's why, again, when it says you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, in the view of my enemies, there's definitely a sense there that this is somebody who feels confident even in battle. There's no
You
question.
picture
Yes, there's no question.
a table
Yes.
sitting there and maybe 1,000 yards away, you know, you've got, this is like breakfast, not Game of Thrones, any of the old, you know.
Yep.
of Kingdom,
Yes.
Heaven and Kingdom or whatever.
Yes. So when you look at this too, there's another thing that commends that, which is this line too, right? Only goodness and steadfast love. However, you're going to tell, only chesed, only goodness and chesed, right? Which is tov, good stuff, and chesed, which is, they translate as love. We say mercy or love. Only goodness and love will pursue me all the days of my life. Now, the only time you really use the word pursuit, look, when we say follow, right? Follow, that doesn't have the same connotation. Follow is like my dog follows behind me, right? Pursuit has a little bit more of a connotation of they're chasing me. It's the dog, the wild dog that's chasing me down the street, not the dog that's on a leash that's walking behind me and is my little pet. Rodef is oftentimes, almost always, has a negative connotation, right? It's the person who's going to rob you, or it's the person who's going to do battle with you. So when someone's pursuing you, right, they're trying to hurt you. But what he says is only goodness and mercy will be pursuing me, right? So the word follow is really not a good translation. Follow has more of a passive understanding here. Pursuit is it's going to be chasing after me. And the only things that are going to chase after me, what normally would chase after me, people trying to take me, trying to hurt me, trying to steal from me. Instead, I'm going to be pursued by goodness and mercy. That's what's going to be following after me. That's what's going to be pursuing me. That's what's going to be on my tail. It's going to be those things. So it's not going to be enemies anymore. It's not going to be people that are at war with me, that are trying to destroy me. So this is definitely an understanding that I will survive battle. And when this is over, I'm not going to have any more things chasing after me, which is a really nice idea, that pursuit. So yes, to also use to build on this as a war, having these war, these symbols of war, of battle, they're that, there's that too.
You know, Rabbi, I'll bet you anything, when he wrote this, he was exhausted, he was tired, enough war, enough fighting, I guarantee you, right?
Yeah.
That when he wrote this, that he was, enough's enough.
Yep.
Enough.
And the problem for him is it never stopped. And because the next stuff, once he pacified all of his enemies, right, around him, it came from his own house. And that was the punishment that he had, right? The punishment he had was Absalom and Amnon, all the stuff that went on in his own house. That was his punishment, right? His punishment wasn't that he had outside forces after him, and we read this amazing text in the Talmud, by the way, last week. It was a description of Psalm 3, which is the psalm that we traditionally say about, the psalm says, this is the psalm that he wrote about Absalom. And the rabbis ask a question, why would he write this positive thing about Absalom? Why would he not say this is a horrible thing? And the rabbis say the reason that he felt like that was because, at least with Absalom, he knew that the person who was usurping him was not a loser, because he loved Absalom. So he was like, I knew, remember, if you recall the Talmud, the Talmud says, look, the prophet Nathan came to David and told him, this is their midrash. The prophet Nathan told him, because of what you did with Bathsheba, I'm going to raise up somebody in your own house, right? And so David's response by saying, hey, at least it's Absalom, was why he could write a psalm about it and not, as the rabbi said, why didn't he write a lament? And that's why, because he loved Absalom. So he said, at least it's not the rabbis actually said, at least he's not a mamzer. At least it's not At least it's not a bastard child of mine that has no respect for the ways that I live. At least with Absalom, it'll be someone, if I die to him, at least, I know that he's a better guy than some of the other guys. It's weird. It's a weird rationalization, but it shows you how the rabbis understood David and how he writes the Psalms. So what else? Any other reasons, any other things that people want to talk about? In particular, again, if anyone wants to comment about the death aspects of it, I want to share this translation that Reverend Lynn shared with me. I wish I could put it up here. Maybe what I'll do is I'll share it. This is from Reverend Will Gaffney. She who birthed the earth is the way she translates the word Adonai, right? She who birthed the earth, which is definitely building on the feminine aspects of God. She who birthed the earth is my shepherd. I shall not want. In green pastures, she makes me lie. She makes me lie down. Beside still waters, she leads me. My soul she restores. She leads me in right paths for her name's sake. Yea, even though I walk through Shadow Valley death, as capitalized, Shadow Valley death, I do not fear evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare before me a table in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Only goodness and loving kindness shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of she who is faithful for days without end. I like for days without end. I like that.
Although we know God doesn't have a gender, it's always jarring to hear the feminine.
Yep.
Sometimes she translates that as they.
Uh-huh. Well, there's definitely a conscious effort on this to make sure that people understood that the feminine version of God could also be seen here. That's a very powerful translation. Thank you for sharing that with us, Reverend. And you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to pop this up in the chat so that you can have it too. So I just took a picture of it and now it's going to. So there are biblical scholars who have done this from, I don't know if you'll be able to, I might have to save this as a JPEG. But there are biblical scholars from the Jewish community who've also used the feminine, names for God, using the imagery we have for the Shekhinah. They've used it, and yeah, it's an interesting thing, especially when we read this psalm. And again, for however we're going to contextualize some of this imagery, using the feminine version of it it's an interesting way of kind of going about. Let me say this is a PDF. Going about the how we make sense of it. So let me just give this. Let me give this now as a. Maybe I can do this one. Putting this one in the chat. Whoa. Here we go. All right. So, yeah, hopefully this will kind of open up our ideas and our minds to other ways to understand this psalm. Let's listen to a couple musical versions, shall we? Let's listen to a little. Let's listen to a little music of this. I think I'm going to share a couple versions of it. This is a really beautiful version. Oh, I think I have to. I have to optimize it for sound. Listen to this one. This one was done by Bobby McFerrin of Don't Worry, Be Happy. An Anglican, yes, he is. And you can hear this is very, very comfortable in church, but this is the Don't Worry, Be Happy guy. It's a beautiful version. Let me turn it up a little bit. He must have written this for church.
She restores my soul. She rights my wrongs. She leads me in a path of good things and fills my heart with songs. Even though I walk through a dark and dreary land,
That's how he translated, dark and dreary land.
there is nothing that can shake me. She has said she won't forsake me. I'm in her hand.
And there he used the feminine too.
She sets a table before me in the presence of my foes. She anoints my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will live in her house forever, forever and ever.
Pretty, right?
Glory be to
It was pretty, right? It's good, right? It must have been written for a church service. I mean, it has to be. This one was an interesting one. I thought this was totally different. This is a reggae version.
It's so good to praise the Most High God every day with your whole heart desire. Lift him high, holy, 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 yeah. Holy Mount Zion, would you listen? The Lord's my shepherd, I'll not want. Make me down to lie in pastures green. Thou leadeth me the quiet waters by. My soul, oh, hath restored again, and me to walk thou snake within the path of righteousness, even for his name's sake. Yeah, no, I walk.
I like that version a lot. I mean, I sometimes enjoy, the reggae music of our ancestors. No, it's not our ancestors, but what's weird is I planned on playing that a long time ago, and then I saw this story today. This is an interesting story. This is Ziggy Marley, right? This is his son Abraham, who just had his bar mitzvah 2 days ago. So Ziggy was raised, as you can see, Rastafarian, but his mother, Orly, a guy Marley, is Israeli. And this is the bar mitzvah picture for Abraham. This is Bob Marley's grandson. just had his bar mitzvah. That must have been some good music at that bar mitzvah, right? So that's pretty cool. Yes, I know. There's a lot of people at this bar mitzvah. I don't know that I'm not sure that if it was in Israel. It didn't say he was. Didn't say it was in Israel, but it was just this last weekend. So I had no idea. But for those who just saw that, I mean, I don't know that the Bob Marley movie recently was that great, but it is now another part of the Bob Marley legend is his grandson. So I'm going to play one more piece of Psalm 23. There's a lot of versions of it, but this was probably the most popular version that ever came out of Psalm 23 because more people heard this than any of the versions that I've ever heard of Psalm 23 before. It's definitely one that you'll say, was that really Psalm 23? Of course it was. Here it is. You know it.
As I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I take a look at my life and realize there's nothing left. Cause I've been blasting and laughing so long that even my mama thinks that my mind is gone. But I ain't never crossed a man that didn't deserve it. Me be treated like a punk, you know that's unheard of. You better watch how you're talking and where you're walking, or you and your homies might be lying in chalk. I really hate the trip, but I gotta low. As they croak, I see myself in the pistol smoke. Fool, I'm the kind of G the little homies wanna be like, on my knees in the night, saying prayers in the street light. Been spending most of their lives living in the gangster's paradise. We've been spending most of their lives living in the gangster's paradise. We keep spending.
So that song obviously became a #1 hit using the imagery from Psalm 23. I mean, it opens with Psalm 23. There was no question that he was incorporating the message of Psalm 23 for the life of of a street gangster of the 90s, of living in, and again, happened to be the movie takes place in LA, but obviously in a lot of the urban neighborhoods in America, of people thinking that their lives were not going to be very long, right? That they were not going to live a long time. And of course, the irony of the title, Gangsta's Paradise, is there is no paradise. There is no, I mean, it's an oxymoron. And he's recognizing that the fatality of a life like that, it's immense. And he's not encouraging it. I mean, he's basically saying this is the life that people have chosen, and they're surrounded by death. And that's it was a powerful version. And again, the song was huge. It was in a huge movie at the time, and the song was a #1 song. And I always felt it was an interesting thing to watch this psalm take on a new life in a genre of music, and in a time when you could argue it was really needed. It was a really needed message to bring that together, where people were saying, the Bible has a message to it, and it's not like somebody's preaching to you in a church. They're telling you in the song, look, this is the world that we've created for ourselves, and we have to get out of it. And I'm not saying that it's I don't want to make it seem like it's been a rosy success, but some of the biggest inroads in stemming the flow of death that came out of the inner city was through music. And to some extent, a lot of forces were at play, but one of the most important was people having music and musicians who said, look, we got to stop the killing. People are getting killed over what color they're wearing, and this has got to stop. And so a lot of these musicians really were at the forefront of ending it. I mean, again, some of them were responsible for death, but others really stepped up and tried to end that cycle. So, you know, you never know. You never know how many lives were saved by people, you know, using that imagery and using the Bible. And I always thought it was interesting, you know, when you think about the points that John made as far as how this was going into battle for people who were living a violent life. Somehow that resonated, and somehow those biblical words from thousands of years ago found new life in that. So I always find it interesting when you see something like that that's been incorporated, that's been recontextualized. And I actually think it was I think it's, you know, lyrically, I think it was appropriate, and I think it's a powerful song. I really do. So I don't know a lot about hip hop and rap, but I do know that, you know, that's a song that crossed over into the mainstream. So any questions, any comments, any last thoughts on Psalm 23? Again, folks, 6 verses. It's 6 verses. And it's probably the 6 most well-known verses in the entire Bible.
Why? How did that happen?
It's amazing because of its association at funerals, because of its use at funerals, it became universally associated. And again, it didn't have to. There's no reason why it had to.
I mean, on its own.
I don't know.
Maybe because it makes me lie down in green pastures.
Okay, and leading me to the valley of the shadow of death, and I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I mean, all those verses are all important. But is it really? Is it really a psalm about death? I mean, it's really not. And as I said, you really have to remind people it's a psalm for you, the survivors, the people who are mourning, the people who are dealing with grief right now. Eventually, you will come out of that grief. You will be okay. But yeah, I think, John, you saying it's a psalm of going into battle or being protected in battle or not being scared when you go into battle, I think it's more appropriate for that, arguably.
Possibility of death is battle.
I just picture the table, everybody's in their armor.
Yeah, in the big tent,
Spyglass.
and they're sitting there eating food.
Ready to go.
Yeah, but they're eating, and they're eating at a table, which means they're not scared, right? They're not scared. They're going into battle well nourished. If you're right, if someone's watching them while they're eating, they're relaxed.
Agitating the other side.
Yeah. I'm sitting there eating my food in the tent while you guys are biting your nails. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. 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 And at the end of the day, you have no enemies. At the end of the day, the only thing that's chasing after you is good stuff. That's the only thing you'll eventually have to worry about. Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice image. And it's not really one of death. It's not really one that you'd have to think about in a situation of death. And again, that's maybe why Reverend Lynn or myself, other people don't really, it's tough. I feel like I have to because of the expectation, but I really feel like I'm shortchanging people by telling them this is a psalm for your funeral.
We could have the option to use the King James version.
Mm.
Nowhere else.
Well, the King James version, I know this because I was at Hillside yesterday. So the 3 big Jewish cemeteries are Hillside, Mount Sinai, and Eden. Eden has the King James in their book, in their memorial book. Hillside has the JPS. Mount Sinai has 2 versions. One of them, I think, is the JPS, and the other one's a very modern version of it, which I like because it doesn't use masculine form God. It doesn't say he, it says Adonai. And but it uses Adonai instead of God or Lord. But it's a very modern translation. It doesn't have yea. You know, that's one of the giveaways, right? Is whether it says, yea, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, right? Though I walk through the valley. So the word gam is where they translated as yea. Because if it just said ki lech, if I walk through the valley, that would just be I walk. Well, I mean, the whole phrase gam ki lech is that because I'm walking through the valley, as I walk through, yea. The reason that they use the word yea is because there has to be something before I walk through the valley of shadow of death. He doesn't say I walk through the valley. It's not what it says. The Hebrew is gam ki lech, which again, you could translate it as because sometimes I'm walking through the valley of shadow of death, or, you know, I'm also walking through, you know, the word gam in Hebrew, modern Hebrew, means also, you know, or thus, or again, it has an understanding of it's one of those words that you have to translate it. So I don't think people know exactly what to do with it, which is why they said yea. You know, it's like hine in Hebrew, here. Like, why does it say hine? You know? So it was used, and so we translated it. And there they go. They translate it as though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. So that's kind of the giveaway too on how you're going to translate these words. But again, what we really also want to point out is it does not say forever and ever. I'm not trying to destroy your version of Psalm 23. I'm just telling you, if you want to know what the actual Hebrew says, that's what it says. All right, now we read Psalm 22, we've read Psalm 23 now, and we'll move to Psalm 24, unless there's anybody else who wants to say anything more about Psalm 23. But I'm glad we discussed it. And thank you, Reverend Lynn, for giving us this new translation, which I like, Shadow Valley Death.
Like Friendly Valley.
Yeah, Friendly Valleys. San Fernando Valley. It's San Fernando Valley Death. So, all right, here's Psalm 24. See how it feels compared to the previous two Psalms that we wrote, which is weird, because this is not Mizmor LeDavid, Psalm of David. This is LeDavid Mizmor of David, a psalm, but it is reversed. We don't know if there's any significance to that, but they do translate it differently because it does LeDavid Mizmor. But similarly, that's all it says. And then it goes into this word.
The earth is the Lord's and all that it holds, the world and its inhabitants. For he founded it upon the ocean, set it on the nether streams. Who may ascend the mountain of the Lord? Who may stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who has not taken a false oath by my life or sworn deceitfully. He shall carry away a blessing from the Lord, a just reward from God, his deliverer. Such is the circle of those who turn to him, Jacob, who seek your presence, Selah. O gates, lift up your heads, up high, you everlasting doors, so the King of glory may come in. Who is the King of glory? The Lord, mighty and valiant, the Lord, valiant in battle. O gates, lift up your heads, lift them up, you everlasting doors, so the King of glory may come in. Who is the King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory, Selah.
Yeah. Or Psalm 24. No one ever talks about it. That's for Psalm 24, because after two of the more famous Psalms, and now all of a sudden it's Psalm 24. Look, Psalm 24 is really a psalm of going into battle, or at least God is going into battle. Here's God going into battle, right? A lot of, that's Milchama, is battle. The last four verses are essentially almost like God coming home from battle. So yes, there are Psalms that are very clearly Psalms of war, Psalms where there's battles. The Psalm begins with a really pretty image of God, right? The earth is God's, and everything that's inside of it. It's almost like there's a big bowl, and all those things, a big salad bowl, and all those things are filled, and it's all God's. God's put it all in there. God made the oceans and the waters, deep waters, right? The nether streams, but they're the primordial waters. I'm sure Reverend Gaffney would have a prettier translation than nether streams for that. This is really a sense of God, being, the first part of it, the first 6 verses where it ends with Selah, is almost like a different psalm. And then it gets to this part, which is addressing God directly. Again, it's not a shift in the person, like it doesn't go to second person here like Psalm 23 did, but it does change it does, in the sense that lift up your heads. He's addressing for verse 4, for which?
No,
Those who has clean hands.
those who have clean hands.
Those who, yes, he who has clean hands. I'm not sure. What does the King James have? Yeah, I'm not sure where they. I mean,
Fine as they also.
I don't know why that would be. There's nothing in here that's the plural. I mean, the only plural word here is hands. Kapayim are hands. But hands are always plural. Well, not always, but usually hands are
Who
plural.
have not pledged themselves.
Yeah, that's weird, because here it's very clear that God is almost speaking,
To an individual.
speaking back to the person who has not taken a false oath by my life, which they said, the note here is his life. So there's versions of the Bible. It says there's other versions of the Bible that say his rather than my. Lashav nafshi. That's weird.
My version is singular. He.
Yeah, I'm not sure why, Reverend Lynn, that would be they. It's pretty, that's a weird one, because there's nothing in here. None of the verbs are plural. The only noun that's plural, as I see, is hands, which again, almost always is plural.
Maybe they're woke.
No, it's not a woke translation. It's a bad translation, because it's not. If anything, that's almost implying there's more than one God, because. Well, is it?
Send the old Lord, and who can stand in his holy place? Those who have clean hands and a pure heart, who have not pledged themselves to falsehood, nor sworn, what is a fraud.
Wait, but they're still having. Oh yeah, I guess, because they have who has not rather than the one who is not. I don't even have an issue with that, but it's still a singular. The person who's saying it it's not saying, and the people that, and all those people that swear by, the swearing is by one person. And
Who can ascend the holy hill? Not he, but they who have.
no, I get it. They're making it applicable to everybody, but it's the same thing as if I said, as if I said, who can do that? Well, the person who can do these things, the person who has a clean hands and pure heart, the person who doesn't swear by God, which, by the way, you're not supposed to swear by God's name. So, yeah, this is definitely the first part of it, though, really does seem to be like, a psalm of, it's like two psalms. It's like a psalm. The first psalm is like for a person who is trying to be close to God and like how to be close to God. And the rest of it is like a song of God, the warrior. It's like a whole different psalm. You want to talk about two different psalms, Mike? This is a psalm that completely changes because this one doesn't seem like it's going to go there. Like, it doesn't seem like this is going to be God going to war, God valiant in battle. Let the king coming home from war. Like, I picture a king on a horse coming into the palace. That's what this is. It seems like. Yeah, well, Selah is a paragraph break. There is something to Selah, which again, we don't know, which is why we don't translate it. We just say Selah, but it is an understanding that there's a shift at that point. But again, it is a very different, this one is almost a different idea. Now, let's look at Psalm 25. Let's move on to Psalm 25, which is, begins with just David. This is just David. This is of David. So Le David. It doesn't say Mizmor Le David. It just says of David. And so then it begins with these words, Eilecha Adonai Nafshi. Here it is.
O Lord, I set my hope on you. My God, in you I trust. May I not be disappointed. May my enemies not exult over me. Oh, let none who look to you be disappointed. Let the faithless be disappointed, empty-handed. Let me know your paths, O Lord. Teach me your ways. Guide me in your true way and teach me, for you are God, my deliverer. It is you I look to at all times. O Lord, be mindful of your compassion and your faithfulness. They are old as time. Be not mindful of my youthful sins and transgressions. In keeping with your faithfulness, consider what is in my favor, as befits your goodness, O Lord. Good and upright is the Lord, therefore he shows sinners the way. He guides the lowly in the right path and teaches the lowly his way. All the Lord's paths are steadfast love for those who keep the decrees of his covenant. As befits your name, O Lord, pardon my iniquity, though it be great. Whoever fears the Lord, he shall be shown what path to choose. He shall live a happy life, and his children shall inherit the land. The counsel of the Lord is for those who fear him. To them he makes known his covenant. My eyes are ever toward the Lord, for he will loose my feet from the net. Turn to me, have mercy on me, for I am alone and afflicted. My deep distress increases. Deliver me from my straits. Look at my affliction and suffering, and forgive all my sins. See how numerous my enemies are and how unjustly they hate me. Protect me and save me. Let me not be disappointed, for I have sought refuge in you. May integrity and uprightness watch over me, for I look to you. O God, redeem Israel from all its distress.
Wow. Now that one obviously is a little bit longer, right? Again, I think that psalm used the word enemy 3 times. This psalm, maybe a little bit more like going back to Psalm 22, is a psalm of suffering, right? This is somebody who is suffering, right? This is not somebody who is asking God, protect me from suffering. Don't let me have suffering. I'm suffering. And listen to me. Because the psalm really begins with a plea, right? The plea is, God, right? I'm hoping you'll listen to me, right? I trust in you, God. Don't let me be disappointed. So this psalm really does have this kind of, well, I mean, we've been talking about it for the last few psalms, the last few classes. We've been looking at psalms that kind of remind us that people would, this was a response to stuff that wasn't going good. The Psalms don't, I mean, how many times have I said it? The Psalms are not cheery psalms. They're not songs of, I love you, God, everything's good. There are psalms like that. Psalm 150 is, a psalm of hallelujah, a psalm of praising God. There are psalms like that. We will get to them. But the first part of Psalms, and definitely this section in the 20s, is a lot of God, it's rough out there.
If David really did write this, you just wonder where his mind was. This specific song.
Well, the interesting thing is Mike's pointing out, if David really wrote this, definitely our sages and our tradition, and even to this day, the fact that David would have written these Psalms is a reminder that, his life, we know his life it had lots of ups and downs, right? It was not all easy. And if he found within him the ability to pray to God and to sing these Psalms, then, well, obviously he was a special person, but it teaches us that we can survive these catastrophes. I mean, look, part of what David does in our text, because he exists, those of us who are with, who read the book of Samuel with us, you saw how rough that life was. I mean, it is, I tell people all the time, if you have not read the book of Samuel and you have not seen the version of David that the Bible actually presents, not the version that you see in a movie, not the version that they teach in Sunday school, but the actual life of David, I've told you, you've seen it. It's like Game of Thrones. I mean, it is a violent, I mean, it is disturbing. It's disturbing. He has some great times, but he also lives through some, I mean, your son raped your daughter. That's pretty much about the worst thing that someone could live through. And then the other brother killed that brother. I mean, I don't know how much worse that could get for a family. You want a family dysfunction, that's pretty much up there. And then that same son tries to kill you. I mean, if David had the ability to write this response to the parts of his life that were tough. Look, what's weird about this psalm is that, like, this is one of the psalms where you go, oh, maybe David really wrote this, right? Right? Because David says, right? I mean, the writer says, the psalmist says, be not mindful of my youthful sins and transgressions. Person flat out says, I screwed up. And the word ne'uri, that is my youthfulness when I was a young man. Right? However you want to translate a chet and a pasha, these are words that we use at high holidays. These are I screwed up. I messed up. There's a few of those in here too, right? He shows, we don't use the word sinner a lot, but that's what Chataim translates as, those who've sinned, those who've transgressed. People, not one person, people. That is a plural. And what do they get? They're shown the way. Again, same thing. He guides, which we read before, right? In Psalm 23, he guides us on a path. Right? And this path, though, is a path not of safety, but of doing the right thing, of a better life. This is a great psalm for someone who was in prison, or went through addiction, or went through some stage of their life where I've acknowledged. This isn't like Psalm 22 where I don't know why this is happening to me, God. I don't know why these bad things are happening. I'm being beaten for no reason, which is, again, one of the reasons why that psalm applied to Jesus. This is somebody who says, I screwed up, and I'm counting on you, God, to forgive me. I'm counting on the fact, God, that you will not leave me disappointed. Right? So this psalm is really, very specific. I mean, like you could argue, why is this psalm not as well known? Because, not everybody feels that they screwed up a lot in life. I mean, there's a lot of us who do, but this doesn't apply to everybody. And maybe there's a smaller group of people who feel this way. And so what's the payoff? Whoever fears the Lord, he shall be shown what path to choose, right? He'll be given guidance. God will help them find the right path. Again, this isn't necessarily a path of good behavior or law, but a good path of life, because that person will live a happy life and his children shall inherit the land. And we talked about this before. We talked about this at Shavuot. We talked about the covenant. What is the biblical, at least the Deuteronomistic goal of life? It's so you get to live in the land, so that they will inherit the land, so that you will stay as part of the covenant, which is the word that's used here, a brito. So this is somebody who is definitely turning to God. They still feel afflicted. The person says, I'm alone and afflicted, right? My tsuris, my tsarot, which is my tsuris is in my heart, right? It's inside of me. So, but there is an understanding that this is somewhat self-inflicted, because he says, look at my affliction and forgive my sins. So, this is definitely a psalm that the person recognizes that they've screwed up and they're asking for help and they're hoping that God will listen to their prayer. But there is a sense of responsibility in this too, which is the person did something and they feel responsible for the situation that they're in. And again, it's our hope that they can get out of it. The hope is God will give them a path to get out of it. So again, a lot of the imagery that we've seen in previous psalms, the enemies, the path, this psalm doesn't really have as much of the beauty of the earth that we've seen in previous ones. This one really doesn't have that. The previous one did, right? The previous one began with this beautiful image of the Lord and everything that's in it, the earth, everything that's in it, God created. And again, the waters. And this one doesn't really have any natural imagery, right? It's really focusing more on emotion and on sin and on, it doesn't really, it says inherit the land, but it's not specifically talking about anything on the land. This is really more of an emotional psalm rather than any approach to the natural world. It's interesting, of course, that it ends with this, "O God, redeem Israel from all its distress," which seems to be a collective plea, not just for the individual, because everything up in here was me, I've sought, I've done, but it ends with this kind of big prayer for God to redeem Israel, which again, maybe he's saying, I'm part of that collective, I'm part of that group of Israel, but there is that sense that maybe at the last minute or the last moment, I'm going to appeal to God as the God of our people. and I'm part of those people. So that's, it's weird because you don't think of this as a collective at all until the very end, which is, it says, God,
Unless it's a metaphor.
what do you mean?
Unless it's not really an individual, but rather a metaphor for the sins of Israel.
Could be, but it just threw that out. And you could say, because God, you do it for everybody, or please do it for everybody, include me in this. But, it's only strange that this is a very personal discussion with God, right? Though, again, there's a recognition that God does this for other people, for those who fear him, but there is a real sense that this is my personal plea. This is my personal plea. Though, again, it also has that at the beginning. Let me see. For you, oh no, that's all mine. That's all mine. Yeah, it's very much a personal thing. And then at the end, he just kind of throws us out that God is, God does this let God do this for everybody. So, yeah, a lot of I in this one. So let's take a look at Psalm 26. Very similar kind of message that we're going to see to what we just read in Psalm 25. Let's read this one.
O David, vindicate me, O Lord, for I have walked without blame. I have trusted in the Lord, I have not faltered. Probe me, O Lord, and try me. Test my heart and my heart and mind. For my eyes are on your steadfast love. I have set my course by it. I do not consort with scoundrels or mix with hypocrites. I detest the company of evil men, and I do not consort with the wicked. I wash my hands in innocence and walk around your altar, O Lord, raising my voice in thanksgiving and telling all your wonders. O Lord, I love your temple abode, the dwelling place of your glory. Do not sweep me away with sinners or snuff out my life with murderers who have schemes at their fingertips and hands full of bribes. But I walk without blame. Redeem me. Have mercy on me. My feet are on level ground. In assemblies, I will bless the Lord.
Now, this psalm seems to be a psalm of somebody who, unlike the previous psalm, is not doing bad things, right? I do not consort with scoundrels or mix with them. I don't do bad things. I don't like being around evil people, right? And I walked without blame. This does not seem to be the previous person, right? Again, right? It does say of David, right? This does say of David, but this is somebody who has a slightly different attitude. This is somebody who does not do bad things, right? And so because I don't want to be punished with the other people. Again, similar ideas, similar kinds of looking to God for protection, for help. But this one really is almost like, God, don't let me have don't let me be accounted with the people that you are going to punish. So the previous psalm had this feeling like, hey, I've tried to straighten out my life. I want to live a good life. I know I've done bad things before, but this person really has the attitude of, I'm doing good. Don't group me with those people. Again, I would not say that this is a psalm that is used a lot or is very well known.
In traditional worship, as the priest washes their hands before they celebrate Eucharist, verse Psalm is said. Verse 6 is said.
Oh, really? Very interesting. So there is a perfect usage of that in
It's usually said silently.
It's yeah. I think according to what I just read, you here, I'll show you. So verse 8 is part of the Matovu I showed you before. Matovu o Alecha Yaakov, it uses the places of where we worship God. But so some people say it's like Pontius Pilate washing his hands, right? But the Catholic Church says verses 6 through 12 are used during the lavabo, washing of the hands during the Mass, during the Tridennial Mass. And here it says the psalmist who read on the morning of the 5th day of the month in the Church of England. There's not a huge amount of uses to this, but obviously, yeah, if people focus on washing of the hands, this line, ki hazdecha, yeah, is used during the Matovu as, again, being in the presence of God. But it's not used a lot. I mean, it's definitely not a psalm that's used a lot. Any questions or comments? Well, let's get to Psalm 27, which I wasn't 100% sure we got to, but we did, thankfully. And I wasn't like I was rushing to get to Psalm 27, but I really like Psalm 27. We use this at high holidays. By the way, a lot of those psalms in this area, they're kind of appropriate for high holidays because, again, it's about behaving well. It's about, trying to be pure and trying to, get ourselves on the right step. This psalm is actually used during the service.
It's a suggested psalm for burials.
Oh, really?
If you've read all these together,
Yeah.
or if you did an amalgamation of some, they all seem very similar. It's like you sitting there under an apple tree one day, or whatever, an olive tree or date tree, whatever they are. There's not much difference between as you read these. I don't know.
No, the ones we've read so far. Remember, we haven't even read 20% of them yet.
And there's 150. I mean,
Yeah, because they're
what are you doing, Kings?
well, not all of them were supposedly. Actually, the Talmud says, the Midrash on it is he wrote even more. We don't have all of his psalms. We have the good ones. No, he wrote thousands of psalms. He wrote a lot of songs.
How good it is to be a king and not have to toil.
I guess. But the idea is that maybe he wrote some of them when he was a younger guy too. He wrote them over his life, right? So some of he wrote when he was out in the fields. And so here's Psalm 27. It says Sephardic communities, many recite the psalm I'm not showing it yet, sorry. They use this psalm at the part of the Shacharit service, right? In most Ashkenazic communities, it's recited twice daily in Mincha or Mariv, right? And it's read from Rosh Chodesh Elul to Shmini Atzeret. So the idea of reading this twice a day from Rosh Chodesh Elul to Shmini Atzeret means that you don't just read it. You read it twice a day, and you read it from the time that we start the repentance time, which is the beginning of Elul, which this year will be beginning of September, all the way through till the middle of November. Hoshana Rabbah is the end of Sukkot. So again, this is considered a time of repentance. It says the custom does not seem to be older than the 17th century, but and then you can see also verse 7 is found in the repetition of Shacharit, Amidah during Rosh Hashanah. Verse 13 is used in the Musaf Amidah during Rosh Hashanah. And verse 14 is the opening verses recited by some before Ein Kelohenu, which we do all the time. But again, a lot of places don't do that. But let's look at Psalm 27, which, now let's look at Psalm 27, which is, second, Psalm 27 is up over here. What did I do with it? Oh, let me just get it up there right now. And here we go.
Not there yet.
Nope, now it is.
Of David. The Lord is my light and my help. Whom should I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Whom should I dread? When evil men assail me to devour my flesh, it is they, my foes and my enemies, who stumble and fall. Should an army besiege me, my heart would have no fear. Should war beset me, still would I be confident. One thing I ask of the Lord, only that do I seek, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord, to frequent his temple. He will shelter me in his pavilion on an evil day, grant me the protection of his tent, raise me high upon a rock. Now is my head high over my enemies round about. I sacrifice in his tent with shouts of joy, singing and chanting a hymn to the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry aloud. Have mercy on me, answer me. In your behalf, my heart says, seek my face. O Lord, I seek your face. Do not hide your face from me. Do not thrust aside your servant in anger. You have ever been my help. Do not forsake me. Do not abandon me, O God, my deliverer. Though my father and mother abandon me, the Lord will take me in. Show me your way, O Lord, and lead me on a level path because of my watchful foes. Do not subject me to the will of my foes, for false witnesses and unjust accusers have appeared against me. Had I not the assurance that I would enjoy the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living? Look to the Lord, be strong and of good courage. Oh, look to the Lord.
So this psalm, and again, one of the reasons why I think it's so popular, why it's used in liturgy, why it's used in church, is because there's activity going on here, which is even more to some extent. Well, I don't want to say it's better than Psalm 23, but there's stuff in here that is very, very, it's almost like it comes to life. It's almost like this is like, I want to say it's like colorful in that there's imagery in here and there's activity in here that is like bursting with energy, right? There's obviously, recognition of the bad stuff, which we've talked about over and over again. The Psalms are filled with bad stuff. I mean, you can't get much worse than people are coming to try to eat me, which again, there's different versions of it. What does the King James say? Verse 2. I mean,
my enemies and my foes came upon me to eat my flesh.
yeah, that's the word. To eat my flesh, devour my basar, my body, Basar means flesh. I mean, that's what we use to translate as as flesh. I mean, it's meat. Anybody have any comments about this psalm, why it stands out in your mind? Anybody?
I'm very familiar with. And King James, it says, wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say.
Yeah. Why does that stand out for you? Very nice.
Well, what?
Mary just said it's God's timing. It's not ours. She's talking about the very end of this song, right?
For me,
Yeah,
it's
we have that phrase in Hebrew, chazak va'amatz, right? Be strong and be of good courage. And that is what we say in the Israeli military. They say also, chazak va'amatz. That is, be strong and be of good courage. We have it in Joshua. We have it elsewhere. I told you some people have this tattooed on them. Interestingly, usually not Jews, but I've seen professional athletes or college athletes that have chazak va'amatz. Usually, like a linebacker will have that on their arm. Chazak va'amatz, be strong and be courageous. John liked verse 3. Should an army besiege me, my heart would have no fear. Should war beset me, I would still be confident. Yeah, I mean,
that dovetails back to 23.
yeah, there's no question that when this imagery is used of military, that people understand it, like what could be worse than a war, right? And
What you lose.
this is saying I'm going to be okay with that. What's interesting, of course, is that you don't have to be in that situation. There's another horrible situation. My father and my mother abandoned me. I mean, that's about as hard as it can get. My mother and my father abandoned me. I still have God. This is a very powerful image. This is not one that, like, that's why I say, I mean, this is colorful because it just jumps out at you. I mean, it jumps out at me. That's like, how much worse of a situation could it be for you when your own parents have forsaken you, right? That's what the word azavuni means. That's like lama azavtani. Why, God, have you forsaken me? My parents have forsaken me, right? But God will bring me in. God will gather me. I won't be alone. This is, again, we hear this phrase all the time in Psalms, right? The path, show me your way, lead me on a path. A derech, we have that phrase used all the time, including in Psalm 23. You lead me in right paths, right? So enemies always are there. I mean, the word enemy or foe, we've seen all over the place. It's all over. In almost every one of the Psalms we've seen, my enemies. That's why, like, when people focus on, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies or mine enemies, whatever. You know, it's in every one of the Psalms. The Psalms are filled with this imagery that your enemies are after you. And the external threat to you is one that the Psalms speak over and over again about. The interesting thing, though, is there's also this sense of the internal enemy, right? And so there's a play with that. There's a play on that, but some of the Psalms, like some of the ones we just read today, are much more about the internal battle, and some of them are really about the external battles. This one a little bit more, but this is definitely, again, one about courage. The part I'm looking to show you is, it's a little covered up, is the phrase that everyone loves. And again, some songs are written just on this line, verse 4. Achat sha'alti. What's interesting about this phrase, achat sha'alti, is the word achat means one, right? So one thing. That's got to be there. Achat is one. One thing, God. Only one thing. And that is to be in your house. Kol yemei chayei, which is the phrase that we had in Psalm 23 too. All the days of my life. And here, what's interesting about it is the focus is on to be in the house of the Lord, right? Which we assume is Jerusalem, to be in the temple, which again, for someone who lives in Jerusalem, That's an interesting image, but it never went away. Even when we didn't have the temple, people love this idea of what can I be? Where can I be? I can be with God wherever I am. Beit Adonai means the house of the Lord. Now, again, the word at the end, Heichal, is usually the word for temple, his temple, right? Heichalo is his temple. But, Beit Adonai, when we focus on that, you could just do that. And I have a friend who wrote a version of this, and it just goes, Achad sha'alti me'ed Adonai, Ota evakesh, shivti beveit Adonai. It ends with beveit Adonai. No, kol yimei chayei. It ends with kol yimei chayei. So it doesn't have the last part to gaze on the beauty of the, which again, to some extent is like a repetition of this, but I guess house of the Lord can be anywhere. The Heichal is really the temple. Maybe that's why that was chosen. Any questions or comments? I want to play that version right now. I actually have a video version of it, and I've played it before, and some of you have seen it, because my friend is also a person who has performed at our synagogue, or not necessarily in our synagogue, but when we've had services in other places, he has performed it. So I'm going to play you a version of this song of Achat Sha'alti, and one version of this, I'm not sure if it's this version, but one of the versions, yeah, it is this version, was animated by another one of our friends who's known as Rick Lupert. So here we go.
Yeah, this is.
What? So I'm going to put it up there, folks. You ready? Wait, there's a big buildup on that. 1 second. I was looking at some of the chats. Oh, why is this coming up on Facebook? Whatever. Wherever I played it from, it's fine. But I've put this up for people before. Here we go. It's Gabriel Mann, with his daughter Piper. Achat Sha'alti. Yeah, used to come to High Holidays. You do the music for Modern Family. I love them looking at each other at the end there too. I love that.
She has such a terrific voice.
She has a terrific voice. That's Piper. That's his
That was
daughter
really nice.
who just started college. I don't know. He's
Absolutely one of my favorites.
yeah. Now his daughter just started at Northwestern this last.
Wow.
She's at
Awesome.
Northwestern, and she's a wonderful kid. And I will tell you, I spoke to him right around Passover time, and yeah, that really sweet kid is at Northwestern, and she's in the a cappella group there.
Oh, really?
And they asked her to leave because she was a Jew. She was a Zionist. She's just a Jewish kid. They asked her to leave the a cappella group at Northwestern that she was a part of. Last time I spoke to him, but he was talking to her about that. He was trying to help her through that. That was April. So I haven't talked to him in the last couple of months, but I had no idea when I was talking to him that I didn't call him. He didn't call me to tell me that story. I was talking about trying to figure out how to bring some musical joy to people for the high holidays this year. I wanted to, my idea was to have some kind of concert for the high holidays. Hopefully by then the war will be over and we can have a fresh start, but I don't know. Who knows? But we're working on it. But when he told me that story, man, my heart just got crushed because she's a sweet kid, and who would have thought we've gone back in time? So what?
All over.
Yeah. So it was pretty hard. Yeah, John and I were just texting this morning about the chief rabbi of France who told people there's no future for Jews in France. I mean, he said, look, I mean, what's your choice? Your choice is between the National Front or people who are not protecting you. Yeah, but it's like they don't know what to do. The Jews are like, how can we vote for Le Pen's party? They were not Nazi sympathizers. And then the alternative is people who are gonna, kill us right now.
Left or right in French. You have no option.
So that's what they said. That's why he said it. He says, you go to Israel or go to some other place where it's not bad. Anyways, but back to Achat Shalti. So he came out with that during the pandemic, and we posted it up during the pandemic, that version that we did when we did an online high holidays. We got that, and he wrote it, but he worked on it with Craig Taubman, and then Rick, because Rick Lupert works with Craig Taubman, Rick put the little designs and stuff, the little images that pop up. Yeah, he illustrated that. But what I really love about that psalm is that it captures that energy of one thing I ask God, right? One thing. Now it's funny because it's like one of those things, like we have a lot of prayers to God. We do. We have a lot of prayers, but not a lot of them begin with, God, one thing. I want one thing. We don't do that. We just don't do that. We ask God for 50 things. We ask God for a litany of things. But this is such an unusual thing where I don't know of any other times where it says one, God, give me one thing. Just let me be in your house, let me be here. And it's not even like, because you're not asking even necessarily for something for yourself. You're asking, I want to be in your presence, God. I want to be surrounded by you. And so the ask is such a beautiful ask because it's not one of, give me a long life, give me success, give me all the things that we normally would ask God for. I just want to be in your presence. And if you think about it, what holier prayer can there be than to say to God, I just want to be with you? And in which case you're basically saying, I'm not asking for anything other than, to be in your presence and to be filled with holiness. And so you're not asking for anything other than like what God would want us to do, which is to be holy, to be in God's presence, to not be in other places, but to be surrounded by God. So the ask is such a holy ask. It's such like it's like, it's such a loving thing to say to God, which is, I want to be in your presence. It's like saying to somebody you love, I want to be with you. And the only response that somebody can say to that is, yeah, I want that too. So it's special that, like, the one thing that we say, the only thing, achat, the one thing I ask of you, God, is to keep me in your presence. So it's a nice one thing, it's a nice one thing to ask for. So it's a really pretty image, and it's one that I think Gabe brought a lot of beauty to, because he's singing with his daughter, and he's to me, it has memories of, again, trying to keep people up during the time of COVID, when they couldn't come to synagogue. That was the weird thing about it, is that couldn't come into synagogue, but to be in the house of the Lord isn't a place. It's not one place. It's not the one synagogue that you go to all the time. It's to be in the presence of God, here. My house is a house of God. My home, my apartment is the house of God.
But isn't that why there are constant prayers for everything? So
Yeah.
you're reminded constantly of being in God's presence.
Yeah. But to actually ask for that in the prayer itself is taking it to the level of saying, let's put everything aside. What is it really to be? It's to be with you, and to have to have a life of holiness, to have a life where I'm doing your will, to have a life where, we're in the same place, where I'm living with God, not outside of God, not having to come to see God or to feel away from God. It's to be in the presence of God all the time. And that's the only thing. I mean, achat sha'alti, the one thing I ask, the one thing evakesh, the one thing. And look, Gabe knows enough about Hebrew. That's a good thing about why when he writes Jewish songs. There's some people who write Jewish songs that they're beautiful. And don't get me wrong, they're beautiful songs. They don't understand the Hebrew. He hits the Hebrew exactly at the right places. Achat sha'alti, the one thing I ask. Evakesh, the one thing I ask for, the one thing I seek, is the hit he makes on Evakesh, which is, I seek that, that's what I'm wanting. So Sha'alti and Avakesh are parallel. Those are the one thing I ask, the one thing I seek. So it's yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful psalm. And that line, again, that's an example of one line of the psalm hitting it, and like, I just can inhabit that one line of the psalm. But yeah, you can see why this psalm is definitely for the high holidays, as we come back to God during the time. Well, we're not there yet, but in a month or so, the way our year goes, we have Tisha B'Av next month, which is the destruction of the temple time. And then we have, that's the low point. And then we spend the next 7 weeks between Tisha B'Av and high holidays coming back to God and returning to God and feeling the idea of that 7-week period was God. Every year we kind of reenacted the destruction of the temple and to be back in God's house. Yeah, it's a fast day and it's a sad day. And it's a day where we kind of like put all of our suffering into that day. Be interesting to see what happens this year on Tisha B'Av, if war is still going on.
We should do something.
Yeah, we've tried in the past. Yeah, we've not had very good attendance. Some people have said we should have done a Holocaust Remembrance Day on Tisha B'Av. That should have been our Tisha B'Av. That would have given another level to it. And some people, there are reflections on Tisha B'Av for the Holocaust, but yeah. So as we hit that low point, as we come back to God, we ask God, not to be hidden, right? That's what this psalm starts with. It starts with this idea of God, don't hide from me, right? Don't right here, do not hide your face from me. So this is, again, I mean, every one of the Psalms almost we've read has this idea of don't let my enemies get me, don't let my foes or enemies get me.
But it's fascinating because that even after the destruction of the temple, you can still be with God all the time.
Yeah. And the rabbis knew that the idea of being in the house of God was your home, was your house. And they told people that. We actually read it in the Talmud. We'll read it again tomorrow night, that the rabbis taught that literally our homes became a mikdash ma'at, became a micro sanctuary, became a small version of the Beit HaMikdash. Yeah.
I'm not the best of students, but I don't remember in this 3 years or so ever when God says for you, I remember build the temple, I understand that, but we've never specifically just pray here and only here. I mean, did I miss that?
Well, when we read Deuteronomy, which we didn't read Deuteronomy, you weren't there when we read Deuteronomy. Yeah, you were.
I was here.
Yeah, you were. You read in Deuteronomy on Wednesday nights. That's where God starts to say, or people start to say, or the Deuteronomist says, in the place that I have chosen for you, that I've chosen for myself. That's where you start to get it. But yes, it's definitely not the message of the first part of the Bible, and it's not, or the first part of the Torah. And it's definitely, there was a time, we've talked about it, where the shift went from praying to God wherever you want to having to pray to God in Jerusalem. It was a major shift. It was a major shift. One could argue that shift was a intentional thing that the priest did to mess that up. So folks, while we were doing this, I got distracted a couple of times. I had to arrange a funeral for somebody who died this last weekend. And I had to arrange, I've never had to do this before. I've been tasked with it, but I've never been on the other side where I had to help fill out the paperwork and get somebody who was homeless, get a burial for them. And so I handled it this time, and we just got approved from Jewish Family Services to do the burial. But yeah, it's somebody I've known for a long time who had a very tough path that ended in a path of addiction and
Where are they gonna
death.
be buried by?
Hillside.
Hillside.
30-some years of addiction and 51 years old. Life ended this last weekend. Somebody I've known for a very long time, and been on the streets and not been in connection with family for 11 years. So they asked me, the Jewish Family Services, by the way, and this is one of the reasons why I really support Jewish Family Services. They did this. I basically said, they said to me, I just found out, I don't want to get into the specifics or anything, but at 9:53, they said, please find the attached approved application for Jewish free burial. We will cover the mortuary and cemetery expenses. Let's see.
When's the service?
It's a good question. But what I had said is they actually asked me, it's a bad story. They asked me where would I want it, and I said whatever's easier for you. They said last night, the woman from JFS, Jewish Family Service, said, I'll be in touch first thing with the committee's answer. It all sounds like it should be approved. Do they have a preference to where they should bury, where we bury? We partner with Hillside, Eden, and Mount Sinai. And then I said, thank you so much, whatever's easier for you. And then they said, Hillside. So they just told me this morning. So Hillside's like the nicest one too. That's like that's you know that, John, right? Hillside's the Tesla of cemeteries. No, it's the nicest, or the Mercedes or whatever I should say. And
I wouldn't use.
I know. But no, I was there yesterday and it's gorgeous. The problem is the traffic. I should have said, don't do Hillside, because I don't.
Yeah.
But when they said, it's interesting, by the way, though, they said Al Jolson. That's the big Al Jolson down by the airport. But it's interesting that Mount Sinai is the only one that still gives above ground plots. The other two only do crypts. But look, as I said, you can't be choosers. I'll just leave it at that. But yeah. Anyways, it's another lesson that you got to be on a good path. We all try to stay on a path of life, and addiction is definitely one of those ones that it's a tough one. It's tough to stay on the path when you're dealing with addiction. There's too many. Every day is a battle. So that's the battle for those, for those people that are suffering. The battle is an everyday battle. So that's why a lot of people do turn to Psalms. People who are dealing with addiction, they turn to Psalms, and some beautiful experiences of Psalms. Prison? Yeah. Oh yeah. People would ask me all the time, is there a part of the Bible that we can read, or there's something, that you recommend for me to read? Look, they have a lot of time, and Psalms, they're perfect for, that last Psalm. How can your prison cell could be the house of the Lord too. So it's what you make of it in that moment. And there are people who do. So, all right, folks, have a great 4th of July. If we don't see you, we'll be here Friday night with Wendy. Maybe we'll do some American songs on 4th of July, on the 5th of July, celebrating the 4th. And let's hope our country reaches its best potential. Let's see if it's the best potential. See you tomorrow night, Wednesday night, for Talmud. And we'll be in person next Tuesday. No, sorry, not next Tuesday. Not next Tuesday. So thank you for mentioning it. Yeah, we will. But we will be virtual on Tuesday. I'll be out of town. But I will tell you, I will not be out of town as much as I thought I was going to be this summer. I'm not going to get into it right now, but yes, I won't be. I will not be. All right, everybody. Take care. We will see you
Thank you.
tomorrow night or Friday.
everybody.
Happy 4th. Take care.
Happy 4th.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Rosemary.